Hello, welcome back. My name is India. I happen to read a lot. And today I was struggling to think of what to talk about. I want to say first, excuse the slightly swollen cheek. My wisdom tooth was taken out. She's annoying me, but the show must go on. I was struggling what to think about for this kind of video because I'd planned a bunch and I was suddenly like, fuck, what do I do next? And it suddenly hit me that I've done a lot of talking about my last year of reading and I've not actually stayed and spoke about myself and who I am as a reader. So I thought the best thing to do was to pick 15 books that I think summarize who I am and who I am as a reader and go through them and talk to you about them so you can understand me better. These more or less are exactly the kind of books you're looking for. I am missing a couple that I thought of as I was thinking about this list, which I don't physically own, so I'll mention them as well. But this is probably as good as you're going to get in terms of everything that I love in books, that like a book bait kind of thing. If you put that in your book and you say, oh, it's an epistolary novel, as we all know, I will read it, right? So that's what this is. It's like the essential guide to my reading taste. How amazing! To start off with, we have Fullmetal Alchemist by Hiromu Arakawa. So this is the first manga volume I read, like manga series that I read through its entirety. I'd never at that point when I started reading this, and I think it must have been like 2020, I think I read it during COVID. I'd never read a manga series in my life at that point. I'd watched and dipped into anime. I'd watched Romeo and Juliet, Fairy Tale, or in High School Host Club, things like that. But I hadn't like sat down and read manga. I ended up watching Fullmetal Alchemist in its entirety and then decided to read the manga. And this manga is just so good. It is just so good. This manga is so good that whenever I read another manga series, I hold it to this book as the standard. But it is so good. It follows two brothers, Edward and Alphonse, who, after losing their mother, decide to commit a forbidden alchemical act, which is to bring her back from the dead. And the way that alchemy works, everything has to be balanced. You can't give too much or take too much. So if you're trying to bring back a life, the alchemy will take a life. So when they were trying to commit this act, Alphonse lost his entire body. Eric had to sacrifice a limb to bond his soul into a suit of armor. So Alphonse is this I think he's like 11 or 12 at the beginning of the series, just sort like bonded to a piece of armor. And they go on a journey to find the Philosopher's Stone so they can get their bodies back because it doesn't need equivalent exchange. That's what the word I was looking for. So they're like, let's bring our bodies back by finding the Philosopher's Stone. And they end up in this really big, honestly, I don't even want to say it because what makes this series so masterful is that the foreshadowing and the little moments of Hiromu Arakawa just dotting in important plot points and important character motivations will obviously add to the wider story. So I can't say too much, but it's more than just one little scavenger hunt, you know? But it's so good, so funny, some of the best written female characters ever. I look to this as the standard for manga series. There are only two manga series that I think have fully met that for me. The Promised Neverland, which is completed, and I think Free Room Beyond Journey's End will also be up on that level. This kind of represents my love of manga. This book does. It's definitely something that I read all the time. I just pre-ordered the 3-in-1 Hunter x Hunter edition because of this book started it all. Now, this is a bit of a tricky one because this was a proof copy that I received in 2022, but this is House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. And I wanted to choose between, it was either The Year of the Witching or House of Hunger. I knew I wanted to choose one of them. But I never considered myself really a horror reader. I was like, oh, horror's too gory. It's not really my vibe. Then I met Gothic horror and I met The Year of the Witching, both by Alexis Henderson. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. The House of Hunger is Gothic horror, which follows, it's inspired by the story of Elizabeth Bathory, which any of you have listened to the Law podcast, I think very early on in the Law podcast, they do a story of Elizabeth Bathory, and it stayed with me ever since. So when I saw that this was promoted as an inspiration, Elizabeth Bathory was an inspiration, I was like, I need to read it. So it's sapphic vampires, it's very Gothic, it's very beautiful. It made me appreciate vampires. I definitely realised I love a good vampire book. I read Hungerstone earlier. which I absolutely loved, which is also sapphic Gothic horror with vampires. I just realised I love that. Also made me realise that there is a space in the horror genre for me, which I didn't think there was. I thought it was like super, super gory, or just like everything that I'd seen and was promoted didn't really connect to me. And then I read Alexis Henderson and a couple of others, and I was like, oh no, I just like a very specific style of horror. And I now look to horror books more as something that I know that I will read and enjoy, as I used to just really limit myself to fantasy and murder mystery, and I would never stray far from that. So if you said to me a Gothic vampire horror, I'd be like, you're lying. Also, great psychological warfare. If you like a good book where half the horror is just psychological, like, not necessarily like gory psychological trauma, just like mind games, read it. I would recommend anything that Alexis Henderson writes, but specifically House of Hunger. Now, it wouldn't be an essentials list if I didn't have at least one Agatha Christie book. I have been reading Agatha Christie since I was 12. I've been watching it since I was about 11. I watched the David Suchet Hercule Poirot TV show and it changed my life. My partner took me for my birthday to go to Greenway, to her house, and that was such a beautiful experience. I am just a big murder mystery fan in general, but Agatha Christie is the author that spurned on that love for murder mystery. So it would be very, very bad and very out of character for me to do an essentials list and not include Agatha Christie. That being said, it wasn't hard to choose which Agatha Christie I wanted to pick. I went for Peril at End House, which is the 8th book in the Hercule Poirot series. Currently at the moment, I'm making my way through all of the Hercule Poirot books. Then I'll tackle Miss Marple, I think I'm on book like 20 or 21. But book 8, Peril at End House, even though the ABC Murders, I read it and loved it, and I love Death on the Nile, nothing has reached the high levels that Peril at End House set. Peril at End House is also on here because I just love the psychological element of this. The psychological element of this is incredible, and it's done one of my least favourite tropes in the best way possible. That's why it has to be on here. It's just so good. It would not be in Essentials without Miss Christie. Don't read Death in the Clouds though. That's fucking awful. But if you are thinking to yourself, India, that is a crime book that's been written over 100 years ago. I think it's been over 100 years ago. I could be lying. But that's been written ages ago. What is a good choice for something that is a modern murder mystery? Then I would give you my favourite book of 2024, which is Benjamin Stevenson's Ernest Cunningham series. I'm including the whole series. The whole series made it to my top place for my 2024 books. This is the most, and I would say the most inventive murder mystery series that I have read from modern authors ever. Like, I thought there's some other authors who are definitely up there with Benjamin Stevenson, but this in particular, incredible. Each book has like a different gimmick. This one is set on a ski resort where a murder happens, and this Ernest Cunningham is an author who writes how to write murder mystery guides. He finds himself in his own murder mystery, and he has to figure out who the murderer is, but the suspects are only members of his family who have all had a capacity to kill before, whether it was intentional or accidental. And it's so good. I kind of got the vibes of The Gentleman, the movie, not the show, meets Knives Out, movie 1. So this is the kind of vibe I'm looking at modern murder mysteries. I want something fresh and exciting. I love a gimmick. Don't go, I want something raw and real that's grounded in reality. I like those, but I love a good gimmick. I love meta-narratives. I love talking to the audience. I love witty characters. This is just such an inventive murder mystery that while I love the Agatha Christie, the classic murder mysteries, and I always will, if you want to know what kind of I'm drawn to from modern authors, something like Benjamin Stevenson's Ernest Cunningham series. So fucking good, and I highly recommend that people read them. This is the first one. Then we are going to go over to the YA section with Scythe by Neal Shusterman. This is probably my favourite YA book ever. I think I'm going to say that. My favourite YA book ever. This is set in a utopian world. Here's the other thing. I love books that they give you a utopian world and they're like, nothing can go wrong in this world. We are so smart. Humans are incredible. Everybody lives the life that they live. And you're like, who are you fucking kidding? Give me the drama. Tell me why this is not as true as you say. This is set in a world where basically if you took the cloud, like the Apple cloud, gave it all the best possible AI in the world where it can learn from itself, and then put it in charge of humanity, what would that world look like? And so in this world, the Thunderhead, which is this highly developed AI, rules the world and has ended death. Generally, you can die and be brought back to life. There's no poverty, there's no famine, there's no sickness, literally anything. There's no depression, nothing. This Thunderhead has created a utopian world where no one struggles. The only thing that the Thunderhead is not in charge of is population control. So that's where the Scythes come in. Scythes are humans that give up all of their, a little bit like monks, they give up all their worldly connections and dedicate their life to being Scythes, who are basically in charge of population control. Scythes have quotas to fill every quarter, and they must kill a certain number of people. Each Scythe has a different way of killing people. Some people like to just choose someone randomly. Some people like to do a whole shtick. I think if I was a Scythe, it would be dramatic as hell. If I have to give up my worldly connections, it will be dramatic as hell. And the only way that you can die permanently is if you are gleaned by a Scythe. And it's meant to be not biased in any way, shape, or form. Everybody has their own shtick. There you go. And it follows two characters who are chosen to be apprentice Scythes and how they enter this perfect world of Scythedom and harmony. And it's not exactly what it looks like. I think it's my go-to recommendation for anybody who's like, oh, I've got a son, because I do agree that YA is very female-centric at the moment. So if anybody comes up to me and it's like, oh, my son's read Percy Jackson, my son's read Gone by Michael Grant, my son's read like Philip Reeve, all of this, Neal Shusterman's Scythe is so fucking good. This is what I want from dystopians. I'm more likely to go towards a unseeming utopia book rather than just a straight up dystopian. But yeah, this is my kind of sci-fi. I like sci-fi that feels more psychological than like super out in space, you know? Though I do also like super out in space ones, but if I had to choose. But yeah, highly, highly, highly recommend this. Then, because we're keeping with time, I chose Alexis Henderson's House of Hunger because I love Gothic horrors. But I lied to you. I was like, this was the book that made me realise I love Gothic horror. That is a lie. I straight up lied to you. It's Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. If you... I don't think I will ever shut up about this book. Like, people go, oh, I'm kind of looking for something new, Gothic. I'm like, oh, this one? I want a bit of romance in it. Oh, this one? I want something that is a whiplash of a halfway through point. Oh, this one? So fucking good. So good. This is an amazing, amazing Gothic horror set in 1950s Mexico, following our main character who gets asked to visit her cousin who's just married some white dude. And she just needs to go see her cousin, check in on her because her cousin sent this kind of like scary letter to her family. So it's like, oh, if you just go check on your cousin, make sure she's okay. Buckle in. Buckle the fuck up. It is so incredibly good. It's beautifully written. Your heart is in your mouth in that second half. I will never, ever, 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 ever go into the detail about what this plot is because you genuinely need to experience yourself the mastery and the shock, the general like jaw hit the floor for the choices that are made in this book plot-wise. It is so good. If you say to me something like Mexican Gothic, I will give me the book, take my money. It is genuinely so good. To the point where House of Hunger is up there with Mexican Gothic, and those are the only two. Oh, maybe I would also say Hungerstone by Kat Dunn, and it's rarely done. Well done to Kat Dunn. Well done. But incredibly beautifully written, amazing, like genuinely amazing plot. I will always put plot like books on a higher level if the plot literally shocks me to my core, because I kind of feel like certain books don't. Now we are going to literally throw back so much. We're going to throw back to 2017 when I like first properly attempted to set myself a goal of books to read. And this, alongside with another book on this list, we will pick. It is literally one of the books that I say got me into reading. It's this and one other. This is Alice by Christina Henry, and this is one of the darkest Alice in Wonderland retellings I have ever read in my entire life. Now I feel like I'm lying and been like, I was never into horror. I was never... Lies. This is a full-on horror. I will say I did not read that much horror for another like 3 years after this one. And I did not go into this knowing too much. And I remember reading it being like, oh, this is quite intense. But this is an incredibly dark, so check trigger warnings, an incredibly dark retelling of Alice in Wonderland. I went through also such a massive retelling phase around that time. I loved a good retelling, love a fairy tale retelling even now. But all I'll say is that Alice is escaping an insane asylum at the beginning of this book because her family put her there because of her discussions about Wonderland. And I honestly can't really say too much of that because the genius of this book is seeing how Christina Henry takes such a colourful and confusing and discombobulating world and then brings out the darkness of it into her very dark world that she's created. And you look at it and you go, oh, I see what she's done there. And it's more enjoyable when you don't know too much of the plot. But it's really, really good. And that's all you need to know. Honestly, go into this blind. Go into this without knowing anything. All I would just say is check trigger warnings. Why have I said that I rarely read horror? I've been lying, sorry. But this is like the pinnacle book. This and another one on this list are the pinnacle books that got me back into reading. Alice will always, always, always and forever be on an essentials list, a recommendation, because I would not be here doing this. I would not be here with my job. I would be doing nothing if I hadn't read this book. So she's important. Continuing on with the retelling theme, we have A Master of Djinn by P. Djèlí Clark, which is a alternate history. It's an alternate history murder mystery with a strong emphasis on Egyptian mythology and kind of, it's not necessarily retelling a specific tale. It's just alternate history, Egyptian mythology, murder mystery, sapphics. I would also personally say that Fatma does give slightly non-binary vibes, but that is not the intention. She does use she, her pronouns. It's just the vibe that she gives me and my soul. But if you want alternate history, murder mystery solving, sapphics with a massive dose of Egyptian mythology, I would highly, 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 highly read this. It is set in Cairo in 1912. Our main character works for the Ministry of Alchemy, Enchantments and Supernatural Entities as a detective. And you've got genies, you've got djinns, you've got priestesses of specific Egyptian gods and goddesses and how they get powers from praying to those gods and goddesses. It is genuinely, the fantasy element is so masterful, it's so engaging, and it's why I've never said I've been against retellings. I just feel like we need to put our energy, and publishers need to put their energy into less Greek mythology. Even though I do love a good Greek mythology, that market is being very oversaturated when you've got amazing books like A Master of Djinn and others where we're focusing on different mythology, we're focusing on different parts of the world. We need to put our energy into that rather than another feminist retelling of another Greek heroine. Do you know what I mean? Because A Master of Djinn, I mean, where's the second book? Sir, Mr. Clark, where's the second fucking book? It's genuinely incredible. But aside from the fantasy element, which is fucking insane, the murder mystery is so good. I love a fantasy murder mystery. Everything that this author has written has been insane. He has not flopped once. I read Ring Shout by him last year. Incredible. He does fantasy history and fantasy alternate history so well. If you say to me, like with Mexican Gothic, if you say to me the books like A Master of Djinn, I will be giving you my money. It is so good. I love alternate history. I love fantasy murder mysteries. I love books that focus on a different mythology. Everything I could want in a book. Then we have a book I've already spoken about already. I mentioned it, I think, in my 25 for 2025. But this is, alongside Alice with Christina Henry, the second book that I count. It's those two books that I put on the pedestal of the books that got me into reading. Senile Ascends is that book. She is that girl, as they say. But he's a boy. It is, I desperately want to meet the author. I desperately, in my heart and soul, want to meet the author and be like, babes, changed my life. Genuinely, this book, is weird to say a book changed my life, but genuinely this book did. Like, I love Alice, but this would be the number one spot of the book that changed my life. I cannot begin to explain to you how much this series means to me. I will always gravitate towards fantasy books. I love epic fantasy. I will always love it. I'm trying to read more this year. But in my heart of hearts, I will always gravitate towards books where it's actually less epic in scope. This follows one gentleman's journey to find his wife in the Towers of Babel. Now, the Towers of Babel, imagine the size of a village, right? And then a tower that goes as high to the point where you genuinely can't even see the top. Like, genuinely can't see the top. The base is the size of a small village, and then each level in that tower is its own separate jurisdiction. So each level is completely different to one another. It all has different ruling classes, different ruling gangs, different leaders, a different purpose. Everything in this tower, each level is completely different. And nobody really knows what's on the top of this tower. Only like a finite few do. Senile is a man who ends up going to the Towers of Babel with his wife on honeymoon because he's always wanted to go. And my girl, she runs away. She doesn't run away actually, but she does walk like 2 steps too far away and he loses her. And the first book is him just trying to ascend the tower, obviously, and try and find his wife. That is the core focus of the book, is that he's like, fuck, I've lost my wife. The only thing I can think of is that she's in the tower. And he ends up entering the most incredibly imaginative and creative and like the point where you want to like dive into someone's brain to understand how they think of all these really interesting ideas. Tower that I've ever seen in my life. It's a 4-book series. The character development of all the characters you meet is incredible. The imagination is incredible. And it's also steampunk. And I realised I fucking love steampunk. I love it. There's steampunk in A Master of Djinn. I realised if you give me a steampunk book, I'm more likely to read it. I love steampunk, but it's so incredibly imaginative and creative. The prose is the perfect balance of very poetic and kind of flowery without being too much where you're like, geez, give me a fucking break. It is beautifully written, incredibly inventive. I do not understand how this book has not got the hype it deserves. Like, what the fuck? And then a quick juxtaposition, because all of these I feel like make sense amongst each other, and then you just have this one. Fangirl Down by Tessa Bailey. Was it last year or the year before, I became a romance girl, which I didn't think was going to happen. And I had to pick a romance book for this list because I do read romance now. I used to be kind of one of those people that's like, oh, I don't read romance. I just read murder mysteries and sci-fi and epic fantasy. And then I read It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey because loads of people spoke about it and I thought, why not? And I fell in love with it. And here we are. And the whatever little bit of pick-me girl was left, she's gone. Thank God she left. Jesus, kick her out. Fuck me. Anyway, Fangirl Down is a sports romance and it's a golf romance. Didn't know you could do golf romances. I don't know how you can make golf not that interesting sport, put it into a romance and make it interesting. My boyfriend plays golf. Sorry, Harry. It is just so much fun. It's so good. It has great character development, great chemistry, absolutely engaging. Also, what I'll say is I'll give Tessa Bailey, she never gives me a romantic male interest that I hate. Like, there's never any of this thing where you're like, girl, run away from him. He's evil. He wants to see your downfall. Like, they're all kind, considering even if they're dicks, they're not like evil humans walking on our earth. They're just like, maybe a little bit unlikable at first, but they're just going through it themselves. They're just genuinely nice. And the guys always are like, cool, I want to marry you after meeting them for like 3 seconds. That I don't love. But I really love them. I think they're so much fun. I think Fangirl Down is probably my favourite book she's written, which is why I chose this one. Great character development, just really funny characters, great female character who knows what she wants. You don't hate the male character. You don't think, should I call the police on the female character's behalf because he's a bit of an asshole? Like, what the fuck? Sometimes I will read things on TikTok of romances and I'll be like, wow, I would call the police. I would 100% call the police on this man. If they spoke to me like that, if they did anything like that to me, 999, hello, please pick me up and arrest this man. Just saying. 10 out of 10 for Tessa Bailey. Tessa Bailey genuinely could probably just write the news and I'd read it, so love her. And it wouldn't be an essentials list if I didn't include one Brandon Sanderson book. I'm not going to be around the bush, we all know this man. If you're a fantasy reader, you know who this man is. This is the Final Empire, the first book in the Mistborn series as a whole. Amazing magic system. I really like his writing. His writing's very simplistic. That works for me. The pacing's really good. Master when it comes to plot, foreshadowing, setting up a series, great world building. My God. Again, incredible, inventive fantasy. I had not seen anything like this when I picked this up. Engaging characters, engaging dialogue. I mean, do we have to go too much into Brandon Sanderson? We all know who he is, you know? Now, another crime book, because I love a good crime. I will, normally if you speak to me and you go, are you a character-focused person or are you a plot-based person? I will always, always, always say I'm a plot-based reader first. And most of these books, I would say, are plot-focused readers. Even with Fangirl Down, it's probably more of a character-focused book because I think romances 9 times out of 10 are. But this is the most character-focused crime book I've ever read. I think, it's hard to do character-focused crime 9 times out of 10 because the mystery itself is the most important part. So the plot is obviously the big focus of the story. This book was my favourite book of 2023. So good, but 100% a character-focused story. So this follows 7 women who regularly meet up because they found out they all have in common a connection with this one man called Jamie. All of them have had really awful experiences with this one man. They found out that they all are in the same boat and they would meet together to discuss their own personal experiences and, reach out and find a community after all being treated horribly until Jamie is found dead. Jamie's been murdered and Jamie's head has been found on the bed in the motel room that they all meet up at. What a great way to start a meeting. And one of the main characters, who's a journalist whose name I've forgotten, she takes it upon herself to try and solve the murder of Jamie and find out which one of those 7 women did it, so she can basically kind of cover their tracks or make a case or something. But she wants to find out which one of them did it so she can protect them, while her ex-girlfriend is a police officer who's trying to find out, do her job, find out which one killed Jamie. But the reason this is so character-focused is you go through each woman one by one, find out about their story, find out what happened with their connection with Jamie that brings them to this motel room, that makes them join this group. My God. You will get to the end of this book and you'll be like, oh yeah, such a shame that Jamie's gone. Definitely didn't deserve it. You won't care. You won't care. My God. It is discussions on LGBTQ plus rights, discussions on marital abuse, discussions on gaslighting. It's, again, trigger heavy. Check all the trigger warnings for this book specifically because it's a heavy one. There is one scene in particular with the journalist lady, which I can picture exactly where I was when I read it. And it was so well written, but I felt it viscerally. I felt it in my being. I felt the same, feeling that the character did when she came to this realization. But it is so well written. It is just it's just a mastery at work with characterization, but also an engaging story, as well as it being more of a character analysis kind of book. It is so good. You've got characters of color, you've got trans women, you've got gay women. It's done really, really, really well. And I would highly, highly, highly recommend this. Then we have another crime book because I am clearly just a crime fan. And that is The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. Stuart Turton is an incredible crime writer, but what I respect about him the most is every book that he brings out is vastly different from each other. So this is a classic 1920s manor house mystery with something that makes it different, which I don't want to reveal to you because it's better to experience it while you're reading the book than rather be spoiled for you. But it's not, when I say it is not, at all your normal 1920s manor house, but that is the setting. He then wrote The Devil in the Dark Water, which is set during the time of the East India trading company, and it's set on a boat during a storm with supernatural elements. And the third one, which made it to my top 20 last year, was The Last Murder at the End of the World, which is a post-apocalyptic murder mystery. So he does something different every time. So he's a master all the time of like different genres. He can do historical fiction, he can do sci-fi. This is the first one. I think you should start with the first one he's ever written. This is the first one I ever read of his. I bought it in hardback. I spent the full 20 quid on it. 14, oh. I thought it was £20. It was $14.99 for this. That is good. That is very, very good. Anyway, it is genuinely incredible. It is, again, a mastery for plot. I loved it. I always say I love a gimmick. The gimmick in this is incredible. Great characterization, but his plot stands out the best in this. Absolutely incredible. Again, if you tell me that a book, but like any book kind of gives Stuart Turton vibes, I'm reading it. I'm reading it. It's so good. I would highly recommend anything that Stuart Turton reads, but if you want to read him for the first time, I'd read this one. Then we have another cool book. And this book, Circe by Madeline Miller. When I say to you that I think Greek mythology like is obviously oversaturated the market, and you see me early doors queuing for the next Madeline Miller book, look the other way. That does not get applied to Madeline Miller. I had read The Song of Achilles first. I was like, this is a fine book. I kind of don't get the hype. I appreciate it. It's not bad, but I don't think it's the best thing that's ever been written. And then I bought Circe. Now this one was $16.99. I bought this one, and I think I was served by my friend Jonathan. I'm pretty sure when I saw this. Anyway, I read this. I bought this. I read this. I read it in like 3-4 days. It blew me fucking away. Like, it blew me away. And it still to this day matches up. Like, it's better than Song of Achilles for me. I think I just prefer the story of Circe because I found the middle of Song of Achilles to be quite boring. Like, I love the beginning, I love the end. The middle bored me to tears. This is incredible. It's the first book I ever reviewed on my blog, which is slowly dying a death. Sorry to my blog. But it's the first book I ever reviewed on my blog. This means so much to me. I loved Greek mythology, like, growing up. So this was just incredible. It's so beautiful. I'll be first in line to read the Hades and Persephone book whenever it comes out. I love you, Madeline Miller. The first, like, one of the first Greek mythology books that I loved. It's not the first one I read, but it's the first one that I 10 out of 10 loved. And finally, the last one on the list is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. Again, for me, I think what it is if it's plot mastery. It's plot mastery. A lot of people struggled through this book. A lot of people didn't understand it. You just didn't get it. You just didn't get it. It's so good. This, my brother bought me, and I remember when he gave it to me at Christmas, he was like, this cost me like 17 quid. And I was like, yeah, that's how much hardbacks cost, my friend. This, again, I mean, I read... This, I think, was the first book. I think this might have been, don't quote me on it because I'm known to lie, this might be the first book I ever spent reading until 2 a.m. And I think I finished this on like New Year's Eve. And I was up till 2 a.m. on the morning of New Year's Eve, reading this and finishing it. The plot, it takes a special kind of plot structure and a plot writer to take something as complicated as this book with its vagueness, because she doesn't give you much information through this book, and then to write something as engaging that makes you want to read more instead of going, fuck this, let's close it. Because I've read books by authors who have tried to do something a bit similar, where they try to give you not enough information and be very vague and very whimsical about stories and legends, and it's just not worked. It's not worked. I've not felt engaged. I honestly felt confused. I didn't want to continue reading it. And I think what Erin Morgenstern did here is just, it's masterful work. And if you want to give me magical libraries, if you want to give me meta-narratives, if you want to give me stories that, honestly, it's hard to explain. If you have someone who read it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But this is just a master at her work here. When, again, I will be midnight release. If they ever did an Erin Morgenstern for her next book, midnight release, I will be there. I'll be there and I'll be batting down the doors. Oh, let me in. It is genuinely so good. And I would say those plus The Appeal by Janice Hallett, because I don't have her because I gave her to my sister. Shout out to Janice. These are like my essential books. If you want to understand who I am as a reader and who I am as a person, it's because of those books. Yeah, these books are like the ones that mean the most to me. I love them. I would save all of these if there was a fire. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you kind of understand a little bit more about me and who I love. Me and what I love. Thank you so much for watching. Please stick around for future ones. Please, follow me on social media, all of that kind of fun stuff. Yeah, that's all I've got to say.